Great. And do count to 5 one more time.
1, 2,
We got it.
3, 4, 5.
Whenever you're ready.
1, 2.
Oh, you're good already. We already did a show with you.
Sure. I moved it since though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you're good. I know what you're like now.
You know what it is. He doesn't think I can count to 5.
Yeah.
Well, I barely count to 8. So
Well,
it's an
see,
even number.
you go higher than I do. See, I tell you, you got to watch John here. He's a great producer, does a great job, but you got to be careful.
Well, you have to be a little nuts to be on radio.
You are right.
I mean, sorry. It's
A lot of nuts.
Yeah, I made my own radio show called Skyline Radio once. I mean, I don't know how many aspiring radio people do this, but we had a program called Skyline Radio, and it was really just modeled after the Skyline Tower. Long story short,
Okay.
We made fun of different things and created characters on a tape deck and play the audio back, and we would just have a riot just listening to ourselves. Just
I used to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just, years of that.
Yeah, I didn't do it for years.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I used to create little shows.
Yeah.
I thought so. I thought I might bring that up to see if it happened to,
That's awesome.
Wow.
All right.
And welcome back here at WEBR AM 1440 and WEBRradio.com for the second part of Northtown News. And with me tonight is Justin Higner from the town of Wheatfield. And also, he is the historian there and has been for a few years, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that in a minute. And also going to talk a little bit about the area called Burkholz, in the Burkholz Museum, known as Das Haus, a German heritage museum, right?
Oh, yes.
All right, so Justin, welcome. Thank you for coming aboard here and traveling all this way to get here. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Because we know you had kind of a hike to get here today. But anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself first and how you kind of got into this or how you got started.
After many years of actually being and living kind of outside of my own town a little bit, I used to have to be taken to a special institution from time to time, and on the bus routes, just going from my town in the countryside into the city of Buffalo and back again for a number of years, and the bus routes themselves just actually went through a layer cake of urban to country and country to urban, and during those times I really looked out my window. I see the different peoples and different buildings and different everything else, and that really helped to kind of condition me to be exposed to other cultures and things like that a little bit, in bits and pieces, and you put them all together. Also, I also got into ships and the Titanic and so forth around the same time, so those two different things, both the local and the international in a sense, they kindled my interest in history and art and so forth.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
depending on our time today, we might get into that maritime artworks thing that you're involved with. But
Sure.
In the meantime, for now, how did you get into, your background, what you just mentioned is very interesting right there, just being able to go from one type of school system to another, to a bigger city, to a smaller town, to the village,
Mm-hmm.
that's an education in itself. And you kind of brought that out already. But how did you end up having such an interest in history and eventually becoming a historian for the town of Wheatfield?
Well, I'll start with what history is.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a recording of not just past events, but of different lives and different experiences. And we historians, whether it's local historians or international historians about whatever the subject is, we are primarily the gatekeepers and record holders and the voices of people who can't speak anymore, especially. And if nothing else, we're that. We maintain kind of the core fabric as much as we can with what the resources that we have, depending on the town and the village and everything, those essentials that help make a community live longer in the longer field of time. And, town clerks and things like that, they maintain current records, present records, things that are sensitive and so forth today. we historians take the longer term records after they've kind of aged a bit and put them in that longer term category where they age like fine wine. I kind of call it that, if I want to say it that way. Depending on what is valued and saved and so forth, it ages well. And then as people need to find out, well, when was that building built, or when was that? What was that migration route about? That kind of thing, or a sport, or an artwork, or something. We then go into our archives and say, well, it was built at this time by this person for this reason, and also, why is it culturally significant? Because X was there and did this at that time. So since they can't talk to us about it anymore, if it's the late 1800s or even the mid-20th century, our World War II generation, of course, is slowly dying away, it's up to us then, and to be a military historians, for example, in that area, to preserve their stories of service.
I really, I'm impressed with your explanation. I think you put it so well about what a historian does and why you do it.
It's a sacred charge. It's that I've always kind of put it that way too.
And it's a good way to put it. I've never heard it stated that way, but that's great. That's fantastic. And how did you end up with the town of Wheatfield as being their historian?
Well, I was attending a meeting of civic leaders and locals, and the discussion was who we going to fill vacancies with the town. I was already involved with the town in a couple of other levels, informally, on the side, for a number of years. And thanks to people, and thanks to certain officials like Bob Cliff and Tim Demler before him, these two helped get me into things more and more. And eventually I was at one of these meetings, and actually I just lost my father that year in 2016. So I was really just there, at least to sort of participate and to help out on the side. But then Supervisor Cliff, Bob is at the end of the table, and he says, I just received word that Walter Bissett, now the late Walter Bissett, unfortunately died during COVID, the position of historian is open, or at the time he was retiring, and he looked around the room and he honestly said, I can't think of anybody else who would fill that except Justin over here, and he gestured in my direction.
Yeah.
I'm slowly waking up as he's saying my name. What? And so I'm like, necessarily, I was interested, and he looks at me and he says, well, you want it? And I said, so sure. It wasn't something I was expecting, so I took it that night, and it's been quite a ride ever since.
That's a great story. For our listeners, we're talking right now about the town of Wheatfield with historian Justin Higner, and we mentioned a few names. And for those that are not familiar, the town of Wheatfield is in Niagara County, just north of North Tonawanda, and so that's the location we're discussing. Right in the town of Wheatfield, and there's so much history there alone, but there's this little area called Burkholz. What is Burkholz? Because people hear this name and is that a separate village? Is that a little town? Is that a hamlet? What is Burkholz? What's that about?
Well, the town of Wheatfield includes several hamlets and villages, essentially. Burkholz is the most well-known village in the town. It is what's called an unincorporated village, unlike the village of Lewiston, for example, which is Niagara County's only incorporated village. In other words, it's had its own budget, its own council, its own supervisor or mayor in that case. The village of Burkholz is unincorporated, so it doesn't have its own council or constables or that sort of thing. But it does have a very storied and long identity, which actually goes way beyond that particular village. Originally, it was called New Burkholz, N-E-U, in the German, Burkholz, without the T. You'll see Burkholz spelled with a T at the end. That's not quite the right spelling. It was a map maker's error, in the 1890s or so. But the village of Burkholz is a German village in a sense, and oriented because it was founded by 500 to 1,000 or so Prussian Kingdom of Prussia, Uckermark regional immigrants. These are Eastern Germans that came over in 1843 on a series of ships and in a couple of waves to start. And they came into the Buffalo area through Hamburg in Germany, eventually across the ocean, and then up from New York City in the Erie Canal to Buffalo. A heck of a journey for anybody to make on any, I had to figure this in the 1840s.
Wow.
Steam is just coming in a few localized areas, but the oceans didn't know it yet. We didn't have that for the most part yet. So they're coming across a very troubling ocean and lots of mystery as to what they're going to go for. And they're leaving the country that they knew because of many different reasons, religious reasons, economic reasons, social reasons, and they were old Lutheran minded people, so they didn't want to be taught how to worship, what Bible to read by the Prussian state, by the Reformed Church there. They wanted to come over here and be themselves, uninterrupted. And America doesn't interrupt someone's faith, right?
Sure.
So they come over here, and through agents in Buffalo, they established themselves in the future village. Now, back then, Wheatfield was populated by only a couple of thousand people or so. And
you're talking approximately
Really? 1843. And thanks to Washington Hunt, a prominent Lockport area attorney and later New York State's only Niagara County resident governor of the state of New York, he was able to work with different other agents there to donate 25 or so log cabins. There was supposed to be shelter for labor for the Flight of Five expansion project of the Erie Canal, but there was a labor dispute, and those cabins were not actually used. So rather than have them rot, he donated them to these settlers, and they put those together, and then they built and create the village ultimately that you see today. A very interesting and ultimately tight-knit culture with, of course, the Burkholz German Band and other things that really make it stand out in the town, I think.
Yeah, that's right. The German band from Burkholz there. Yeah, they're very well known everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They cut a record or two. And,
Yeah.
of which Edison Stieg was the conductor for that. And he
In
served
fact,
as an Army band conductor in World War
Don't they
II.
have some a couple CDs out or
Mhm,
something?
yeah.
I think I have some. I have a couple of those. Oh, yeah, I kind of forgot the connection there between the Burkholz band and Burkholz.
And it includes French Germans too, the Huguenots, descended from the Huguenots,
We're
French
gonna
Protestants.
we're
So,
gonna continue this
Yeah.
discussion in just a minute.
Just put those in.
We're talking to Justin Higner, and we will be back shortly.
Okay, let me save that.
Boy, it goes fast, doesn't it?
That is 11 minutes. Let's go 17 minutes this time.
17. Okay.
And remember that includes your sponsor, which is...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be the same as it's been, because
Yep.
I haven't eliminated the other yet, so.
Okay.
Okay, 1 second here.
Looks like you got a screw loose here. Look at that. There.
Yeah, this came here too. This fell today, so I'm like,
Oh, boy.
where are these coming from?
Yep.
Yeah, I've been accused of that schools too, but, okay, be that way.
Well, hey, it wasn't on the show. We didn't get that in the recording.
Yeah, anyways.
Except that
was it really? Well, I'm an artist and so forth too, so you have to be a little crazy to be this, and politics,
Yeah, you have to be really crazy for you gotta be totally nuts to do that too. But,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that other side of you another time, I guess.
Well, that's fine.
But anyway, all right, we're gonna continue with that where we left off.
All right, so when we come back, we have nothing coming back. It's just no intro, so let them know the station name, the show name, everything.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, welcome back to the second part of our second part of the show here on WEBR AM 1440 and WEBRradio.com. And we're speaking to Justin Higner from the town of Wheatfield, who is the historian there. And we were just talking about the little area there called Burkholz, and he gave us a little bit of the history there. And that mainly, as you said, was a German community. correct?
Yes.
And even started to get into the Burkholz band now that still performs quite well all over Western New York, I think, don't they?
Yes.
Mostly?
You can also see them at the annual Wheatfield Family Picnic, which is in mid to late August each year. We just started that up again, and they did a wonderful job, as always, in one of the pavilions there.
Now, being the historian and seeing that Burkholz is part of the town of Wheatfield, but it's unincorporated, correct?
Correct.
And there's this little museum called the Das Haus Museum. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the Das Haus Museum is more properly called Das Haus, Ein Haus und der Stahl, German Heritage Museum, in a sense. That's what it basically says outside, because we have 3 buildings. We have the first one up in front. Yeah, we have a house, the little house up in front there, that being one of the 25 log cabins that was disassembled or reassembled anyways on the same spot from the Erie Canal
Okay, I
Lockport
didn't know
area.
that. I didn't know there were 3 buildings.
Yep, 3 buildings there. The oldest is that little house, and it's been, you've got Victorian fittings on it and clapboard and so forth on it, an 1880s, 90s addition off the back of it there. So it's gone through a lot of evolution, but when you go inside, and we're open every Sunday, seasonally, May through October, 2 to 4. And when you go in there are actually a couple of sections that are kind of cutaways where you can actually see through to the original structure of the house, or H-A-U-S, spelled that way. We kind of call it. So when I'm there to Dawson, I say that I'm house sitting. It's an H-A-U-S, house sitting.
How could I tell? You must be a docent there. Well, your German seems to come out pretty good too. Do you speak German or?
Not so much. I don't want to say that I speak much in the way of German, but I do know some characteristics, and I actually had a couple out of Germany, and they came to our museum campus, and I was able to actually get along with them pretty well throughout the whole time, and they reviewed me at the end and says, "We understood what you meant, and I pulled out a few words here and there to kind of make them understand. And I could tell they understood because they nodded and figured, oh yeah, we got that at home, basically. We had in our old family history, we had the same sort of tools that they used here that my grandparents, great-grandparents used in Germany. So when you see people from Germany coming over to see a lot of the same tools that these immigrants and their descendants were using even, they see themselves a little in a lot of this because it's the same kind of culture. It's the same temperate area. They liked it up here that way. It was very similar. And anyways, just going through that first museum, you'll see a lot of different really interesting artifacts from that period, the antebellum era, basically is what we say, from that period up to the 1890s. And when you come inside, you'll be greeted, and we appreciate, of course, signing. And then there's a gift shop there, too.
Do they greet you in German?
That we can. We certainly.
Maybe as you read the audience, or the visitor.
Sure. And then, of course, we also have very interesting guests. Like we had one person coming in, and he basically says, "Hello, I'm so-and-so." Okay. And, "Hi, I'm looking for the family who enslaved my ancestor." Honestly. And this means indentured servitude, because up until about the 1860s, indentured servitude was still a thing allowed here. And although it was a nicer process, relatively speaking, to what it was originally in early colonization, certain people who could not afford their trip across the oceans, or some of them actually had to take sort of piggyback off of other people who did pay. And the arrangement was, I'll work for you for free for a year or two to pay off my trip. And that's a
wow.
Look at Baltimore history, look at other places, a lot of that. So in Burkholz, even as far as the 1840s, this still happened occasionally. And, we looked up as the family that it was. No hard feelings one way or the other particularly. It's just that he was curious and wanted to know more about the situation. And that's one story that we tell there.
And you were able to help them at that little museum there, that little hamlet there, right?
Just that little space. There's so much history, and there's a lot of it still there elsewhere too. On our museum campus, though, the next building is Der Stall. And, or I should rather say, the Ein Haus. It's the next one you come to.
Okay.
The Ein Haus is late 1840s era or 1845 era house barn combination, and actually the framework for that was moved from another property entirely, the Hasley farm down the way, and it was reassembled several years ago and opened to the public with new fittings and things to make it safe. And so people go in there and they can see farming tools and apparatuses and along those lines, and a few domestic items on the other side.
Name. Now
Yeah.
that's a well-known name for years and years in Niagara County.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I was taught in part by a Professor Hasley over at Niagara County Community College. Philip
That's
Hasley.
right, there was a professor there. I had a student who, when I was teaching, was part of the Hasley family.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And one of a number of major names over there.
Mhm.
And so there's the Einhaus, and then finally Der Stall. Der Stall is a reconstructed building, though. It is a recreated old world style barn that was essentially, you would have found out here as well. It was built in the mid-1980s, though, as storage and our research space and so forth for the organization. So these three buildings constitute the whole little museum there. And again, open every Sunday seasonally, May through October, 2 to 4, or by appointment. And you can look us up online at dashausmuseum.org or net, one of those two, sorry. Just look us up at Das Haus Museum and you'll find our website, and you can go right there and learn a lot more about it. And if you become a member, also you can enjoy certain benefits. We do genealogical research as well for members.
You do?
And there's also free public events that people can go to
Now,
seasonally.
for your genealogical research, now is that basically for German background?
Yeah, anyone who thinks or figures based on the research that they've done already, or where they believe they may have had relations, they can approach us, for example, and through a membership donation of $25, it's for a whole year, they can not only get our quarterly newsletter, Der Brief, but they can also join us, and we can research their family histories, essentially, wherever those may lead, and provide that product for them. And as I said, we have public events like this Friday at St. Peter's Church on Walmore Road up there in what used to be called Walmau when it started. It was an old Mennonite community, and then the same German people sort of split off and bought and settled up there too.
Sure.
St. Peter's Church there is our Christmas Carol hymn sing. And there are other songs in there too besides hymns, but we sing them in German and English and go back and forth. We do this every year. It's at 7 o'clock on Walmore Road, St. Peter's Church. And if anybody would like to come on by and join us for that, and there'll be refreshments.
I can't believe how much I'm learning about this, and I just live practically next door to it, you know.
We're a busy bunch.
Yeah, I guess. Well, first of all, I didn't realize there were three buildings, and then I didn't realize what was a part of each one.
Well,
And now I hear about these festivities.
Well, in full disclosure, too, I'm a board member with the organization anyways. So, you know, and I joined that actually before I became a historian, actually.
Where, now, tell the listening audience, where is this museum located exactly?
Oh, the museum is at 2549 Niagara Road.
Okay.
You'll see a little, what looks like a miniature gingerbread kind of house, and we're on the north side of that road, about midway into the village, basically, and down the way from Burkholtz Fire Hall, our first fire hall, founded in 1918, and they celebrate their own thing. They make wonderful chowder over there, thanks to Art Croning.
Oh,
That's another name. Croning's
yeah.
another name, absolutely, and down the way from.
Of course, I taught school
Yeah.
in Niagara County.
Right.
And I had Cronings, I had Hasleys.
And I'm sure you had Schultz's and Cammons.
Yes,
And
yeah, Wentz. And,
Eugene Kamen founded the German Museum actually long ago. He's a local historian emeritus. You know,
Oh, gee.
he was. Yeah.
So, actually, now what assistance do you provide in research for German heritage? I mean, what type of research other than just, family?
Well, sometimes a couple of our board members might refer to contacts they have in Germany yet. It was thanks to the late Mr. Kamen, in fact, that we had. He peeked around the Iron Curtain a bit, and went into the East German area there and asked the right questions in just the right ways to the right people. And when they realized, oh, you speak the Plattdeutsch dialect, okay, we can talk about that. Because some people, because East Germany was a communist, regime, and with the Stasi there and all that, had to be careful who you spoke to, especially if they're not from there. But when he kind of got on their level more, they opened up more about the Uckermark region and Luther's legacy and so forth there too, and those more closer family connections. They were able to focus on those early on, so thanks to him and venturing out that way. At that time, during the Cold War, we were able to help establish a museum better and get better connections. So that's like the genealogical research.
And I know you
also
you did mention earlier, or started to mention anyway, about providing tours for educational purposes.
Yes.
So
we do school groups and seniors groups and so forth. Again, either by appointment or pretty much on the day of. And kids like it. They can go upstairs and see some of the kids' beds, for example, inside the little house in the front there. There's an adult bed and a child's bed, a little old-fashioned teddy bear there, and they can learn about how a spinning wheel worked and so forth.
I've driven by that place several times, and I never would have guessed that there was that much there.
Mm-hmm.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and it's just one story of the total immigration legacy of our country and this area of the world. And it's part of the marble cake of all of our different peoples, including our First Nations peoples, which also deserve to be talked about. And the early settlers had relations with the Tuscaroras too, and trade and so forth. The Tuscarora people, you actually used to call the German people there clop clops. Because of the way their wooden shoes would sound on the pavers. Yeah, clop, clop, clop. You heard them before you saw them, basically, as far as they were concerned. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
What, as people come in, and again, you've mentioned this kind of on and up, but like what other types of materials are available to peruse if you're just coming to look around?
Oh, there's also those different furniture items, and as I said, farm implements and so forth that they would have used at the time, and they still use today. Certain rakes, certain tools. There's a tool inside the iron house called the Persuader. It's my favorite tool. It's really just a large wooden knot that you couldn't make anything else into, so they would bore a hole into it, stick a wooden piece in there, and if you really had to get a beam into place really well, it acted like a sledgehammer or a maul, and you just whacked at it from the side, and you used what you had. And since wooden knots of that size on these huge trees, I mean, really, the iron house is made out of 4 beams at the corners that allegedly come from one single huge tree, probably old growth, that they cut into quarters, and they fashioned them down and hewed them down, and they would have used knots from growths like that to be tools in another way. They didn't waste anything. Because they didn't have much to begin with, and they passed on that the frugality, that thriftiness down the way. So you valued what you had.
Wow.
Dresses, whatever.
And so and we're talking about what time period mostly again?
This is the 1840s into the 1800s.
Okay.
This is a time, by the way, where your wedding dress was also likely to be your burial gown.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. This is the thing. All right. Right. This is that kind of
a little
time.
foreshadowing there.
Yeah, I know.
Something. Oh boy.
Yeah.
There's another place called the Long Home. And I don't know if that's in Burkholz or
you mean the Longhouse Homestead? Well, that's in Tonawanda.
Well, the Long Homestead, but isn't there another place called the Long Home?
Oh, well, there's a long and short over in the village of Lewiston. I'm sorry, I don't recall that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had heard about that, or heard something about it. I don't know anything about it.
I've got a few homesteads in town for sure.
Yeah. The House Barn is another one. The House Barn, something I was reading from 1844.
1844, 1845. It was built fairly early on. So I mean that when you're there, it's all the beams inside of it are all originally hewn and so forth. Yep.
Well, I'm telling you, there's so much I've learned already, and our time is up. I hate to say it.
Well, I would like to actually sort of mention one of the buildings in the town exactly, and this is actually and of course there are notable structures everywhere. We had the Bell Complex, right? We had the Bell Aerospace and so forth. A lot of other things that put Wheatfield on the map. By the 1930s for sure. But this is actually a quote from somebody who used to live at a house that's on the corner of Pierce and Ward Road. Okay. And it dates back basically to the 1870s, okay? And a woman named Debbie used to live there. And as a little girl, she used to visit or live there. And she says on our Facebook group page, Wheatfield, New York, Our History. If you go to Wheatfield, New York, Our History on Facebook, you can see a lot of these different posts. She says, "This was my grandparents' house until 1979 when my grandmother passed away. It had many unique features from days gone by. As you walk into the kitchen, I remember a hand pump that drew water for the house. It had a wooden stove that my grandma used to cook on. Over in the corner I recall a modern stove, but it was seldom used. She knew the right amount of coal or wood to use to make meals. The kitchen was a square room that did not resemble a modern kitchen. No cupboards, and along the wall were hooks for clothing and coats. Off the back, there was a root cellar with a dirt floor where they kept vegetables. It was a few feet down, unlike a modern basement. Off the dining room, there was a smaller room where they kept dry goods on shelves on one side, silverware, dishes, and cooking vessels. On the other side of this was a small, modern to them, bathroom with almost no room to move in. The living room had a small oil heater that heated the downstairs bedroom, dining room, and living room. It had a very steep stairway leading to a small two-room upstairs that even my feet at a young age had to climb sideways, and it was pretty much unfinished with storage in the front and an old iron bed in the other area. I think of that house often, how things were built versus modern houses now."
Wow, isn't that amazing? Yeah, it's...
And that's what it's about, capturing those comments.
Sure.
While people remember things like that.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for being with us here on WBRAM 1440 and WBRradio.com. It's been very informative, and I've learned so much, and I didn't know I could live so close to that, know so little.
Well, I've
just learned so much.
Oh, you were mayor of North Tonawanda, your history too, and part of that, and North Tonawanda's got North Tonawanda, Wheatfield have very close history too, and so forth.
Well,
so
one time
it's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Anyways,
thank you so much. All right, I'd like to thank my guests tonight, Justin Higner from the town of Wheatfield, their historian, and Mr. James Riley, who presented his program on the excellent program going on in Niagara Falls High School right now. And I'd also like to thank sponsor Jay Shepard from the Dockside Bar and Grill, 153 Sweeney Street in North Tonawanda, and the Buffalo School of Rock, 9310 Transit Road, Suite 500 in East Amherst. Anyone interested in becoming a sponsor of this program should contact Jackie Rance at 716-553-4679. And if you'd like to be a guest presenting a program, contact Art Pappas, that's me, at APAP, that's APAPP 1971 at yahoo.com. Thank you for being with us on Northtown News on WEBR AM 1440 and WBRradio.com. Hope to have you listening again next Thursday evening. Good night now.
Got it.
Got it?
Yep.
That was very interesting.